Welcome to Don't Quote Me on That. One day we will have an intro, but today is not that day. Hi, I'm Eleanor.
And I'm Kalina.
And welcome back to Don't Quote Me on That, where today we are talking about a movie I think that we both like. I won't say it's
Yes.
brand new or breaking
No.
that we'll do that, but it's definitely not normal that we A, both like a movie, and B, talk about it on the show. One is a lot, less likely than the other one. You can
And
guess
it's
which.
not Twilight.
It's not Twilight, but don't worry, it's very much related to Twilight.
Oh boy. I've seen this movie several times and I don't know if I could relate it, so I'm interested to see what you came up with.
Oh, the only way I can relate it is that they were both released from the same production company, but I'm
I'm
counting it.
sure if you give me some time to think, I think we can come up with something maybe. I'll work on that. Anyway, what are we talking about? I know it's in the title, but what are we talking about?
Oh, the movie we're talking about is Now You See Me. It's from 2013. Wikipedia says it's a heist thriller, but I think it's just a fun time.
It's my favorite kind of movie. I've just decided this because I really like the Ocean's 11 movies, and I can rewatch Ocean's 11 all of the time, and they all get together and they commit a crime, and they all have different backgrounds. And in this movie, they all get together and then they commit a crime, and they all have different backgrounds. It was great.
I do think that is kind of the which is what a heist movie is. I think you might like heist movies.
I think so too. There's also this movie, funnily enough, now that you mention it, it's called Tower Heist. My dad loves that movie. And they all have different backgrounds, and then they get together to commit a crime. And we watch it every Thanksgiving.
I think it being called Tower Heist might have hinted that it was a heist movie.
I think you're very rude.
Okay, I didn't take a lot of notes chronologically. I just kind of wrote down what I thought was funny, but
Eleanor,
I suppose.
chronologically is the important part. Don't worry, I will give us a play-by-play because I've seen this movie entirely too many times, okay? So what happens is the movie opens, and then you get this little voiceover, and he's like, basically, the gist of the voiceover and a recurring theme in the movie is the closer you are to something, the more you miss. So he's like, I want you to get close. I want you to get real close. Because the closer you get to me, the more you're not going to see what's happening. That's a little voiceover done by the character Danny Atlas. I do not like him.
I love. I
Yeah.
have a soft. This is gonna surprise no one. I have a
Mm-hmm.
soft spot for Jesse Eisenberg. I think he's so cute. I think he's very funny. Um, I it is because I watched what's the end? The Social Network. I watched it a little too many times for like what it is, but I really like it, and I really
I
like
don't have a
him.
problem with Jesse Eisenberg. I just think his character is really obnoxious and
Oh,
arrogant, so I find him very annoying.
his character is super obnoxious, but I think everyone else is like equally obnoxious, so he gets a pass.
Hey, do
Also in the
not
Social
knock my
Network,
man. My man is in this movie. Is that what you said? Because it sounded like you said the cell phone at work. And I was just letting you run with that because
no, the
I,
Social Network.
okay, I was hoping that's what you said, but definitely heard the cell phone at work. And I was like, Eleanor, what are you doing with your time?
That too. No, I watch the Social Network a lot because it has Jesse Eisenberg and Andrew Garfield, and they don't kiss, but like I feel like they should. Does that make any sense?
So anyway, what happens is the movie opens and you're getting this little voiceover done by Jesse Eisenberg, who's playing Danny Atlas. First scene I have problems with. He's doing card tricks in front of a mirror with his eyes closed. I can understand doing card tricks in front of the mirror to like check yourself so you can see what the audience sees so you're not slipping up. Why are his eyes closed? That defeats the purpose of the mirror. Anyway, He's doing his little voiceover, and then at the last moment, he picks a card, and then it changes all of a sudden, which is really cool. And then he's outside, and he's doing the card trick to this lady, and he's like, and you can tell there's like a crowd around her, but he's like, I want you to pick a card, and he flicks through the deck so she can see, and he goes, I'm sorry, that was too fast, I'll do it again, and he flicks through the card deck again a little slower, and she picks the card in her mind, and then he spreads the cards out, and he goes, is your card here? And they say no, and she says no. And then he's like, remember what I told you, the closer you look. And then the whole crowd goes, the less you see. Now, realistically, I have a lot of thoughts about this scene. He would not have amassed that large of a crowd off of crowd tricks alone. A crowd would have gathered.
I have a theory, okay? Are you ready? In the universe in which this film takes place,
Jesse Eisenberg is the hottest man to exist?
No, worse. Music stopped after classical music, and because there's no like pop stars or musicians, it falls on the magicians.
No, I like a good... Listen, and I'm not saying like it's super improbable. Like, he would definitely gather a crowd doing card tricks, right? He wouldn't have gathered that large of a crowd because, like, you know, like, I like... Also, it's funny you say the music thing because that man Common is in the movie and he's a musician. But anyway, it's like I'm pretty sure David Blaine or like other musicians who like have a really big following don't do just card tricks. They be like levitating, and you know what I mean? Like they're doing some just ridiculous stuff and getting crowds.
I don't know anything about it. The only thing I know about
no, I just know the man's name is David Blaine and he's a magician, but also I think in the loosest sense of the term. I like magicians, but I prefer like, we'll come to this in a little bit, but like I don't like shock value magic is fun, but I prefer, you know, like smaller tricks, like stuff like card tricks and what we'll see in a little bit. But like
again, my theory is there are no pop stars or musicians, so all of the clout has to go somewhere, and for some reason, it ended up on magicians. I'm
trying really hard to disprove that, but I can't.
You can't.
Because I don't think we hear any music in this film.
The main part of music that we hear, and the only music that has any like semblance of a plot point, classical music.
Anyway, also David Blaine. So you got people like David Blaine, who's classified here as an illusionist, endurance artist, and extreme performer. And I'm not saying David Blaine doesn't do magic, but at a certain point, like, there's a line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Eleanor's theory does make sense. I'm going to ignore it because that's not my theory, and I want her to be wrong, but it makes sense. Anyway, he shows the lady that he, like, flicks through the deck twice, and he makes her pick a card. And then she picks the card, and then it's not in the deck. Oh my God, where is it? The closer you look, the less you see. And then we all look at this big, tall building, and then the 7 of diamonds pops up on the card. Now, what I really like about what they did here is both times when he flicks through the deck, you, the audience, sees the deck as well, and you see the 7 of diamonds.
Well, yeah, that's how they do the trick. They like, fold through the cards in such a way that the... What?
Yes, I know that's how they do it.
It's the one magic trick I know.
I don't know, so I'm sorry. Go ahead then. Go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is the Magic Federation going to come after me? You can Google it. What they do is they'll like shuffle the cards, but like at you, and they'll do it in such a way that the card that they want you to pick lasts the longest. It's only like a split second longer than the rest of them, but it lasts the longest. So it's the one that sticks in your mind, and so you choose it, which is how they're able to guess your card. I can't go to magic trick shows. I went to a hypnotist once on a cruise ship, and the whole time I was so terrified about getting picked for audience participation that I could not pay attention.
I think he should have thrown you off the cruise ship. Anyway, we see the 7 of diamonds. She picks the 7 of diamonds. That's what's on the building. And then we leave annoying Danny Atlas, and we get to I called this man Merrick for a very long time, and apparently his name is Merritt with a T, but like they sound the same, so whatever. We get to older Woody Harrelson, Merrick with a CK, which like honestly close enough. Anyway, we get like this close up of young Woody Harrelson, and then it zooms out, and it turns out it's a poster, and it's older Woody Harrelson because that's who's playing this man. And he is he's a hypnotist. Speaking of hypnosis, he's like a mentalist.
Mentalist. Thank you.
If I recall, the first thing the mentalist did was hypnotize the woman. So technically, that is in his skill set. That's what he does.
Fun fact, you know who's also a mentalist? The guy from Psych.
Mm-hmm.
He is.
Isn't there a show called The Mentalist?
There is also a show called Mentalist, but that guy is annoying. And so the only mentalist we recognize in this house is Sean.
And older Woody Harrelson in this movie.
Yeah.
So he hypnotizes this lady, and and when she wakes up, he's like, if you can grab this bill out of my hand, you can have it. And if you can speak, you can have it. And he's hypnotized her so she can't move. She can move her arms, but she can't move her legs past the point she's at, and she can't speak. She can't open her teeth. That becomes important later. And then he goes over to her husband, and her husband's like, oh, no, not me. And then yeah, that's right. I used the right pronouns there. And then her husband, she's like, oh, I'm seeing someplace, Florida. And why is it always Florida? To be fair, I would have guessed it was Florida that they were in right now, because they're at some beachy resort. And then a shot we see at the end of this scene is this guy standing in the rain, but it's still kind of got a beachy vibe. And I would have just assumed they were in Florida anyway. Anyway,
nothing good happens in Florida.
That's my side note. Yeah, he's like, I'm seeing Florida, and the husband's like, oh yeah, I was on a business trip. And Mr. Merritt is like, oh yeah, it's business, perhaps the oldest business. And then he goes, I'm getting a name. And I like that we get hints into how their magic works without spoiling too much. We see the card trick with Danny Atlas, and then here we kind of get a close-up of the husband's eyes and mouth, because what Merrick does is he goes through the alphabet. He goes A, B, C, D, G, and then once he sees how the guy reacts, he says J, and he guesses the name Janet, and he's like, oh, who's Janet? And he turns to the wife. He goes, do you know Janet? And she's like, yeah. And she nods. She can't speak, so she nods. And he goes, oh no, please don't tell me that's your best friend. And she tries to say it's her sister, but she can't speak properly. He goes, oh no, your sister. And then he turns to the husband and he goes, you weren't on business in Florida. You were on business with Janet. And understandably, yeah.
I think the hardest part about being that kind of magician, the mentalist, is just the sheer amount of popular names you'd have to have memorized. Because
I was thinking that because imagine it was me. He wouldn't guess my name.
No, he would not. And
yeah, I did blow over that. Before he picks Janet, he goes
only go after white people too, because I feel those have those are the easiest names to guess, you know?
Because before I didn't mention this, but when he's going through after he picks Jay, he's like, Jane. I can't even think of J names, but he's like Jane, Janet, and he's like, it's Janet. But he goes through a list of names, and yeah, whose name are you gonna guess? But I mean, if you're laying groundwork, that will come up later. Laying groundwork, I think it's a little easier. But yeah, for these little short bursts. Also, to be fair, not to stereotype. Well, actually, no, I'm not gonna finish that sentence. I'm gonna move on.
No, please.
No, I think my black card will get revoked if I finish that sentence. So, and I already only have half of a black card, so I'd like to keep it. So he says, his wife tries to start to attack him, so he moves him out the way where his wife can't reach him, and he's like, I think that's worth $250. And the guy's like, what, do you shake down everyone? And Merritt is like, oh, only the special ones, but maybe you don't cheat on your wife and then you can't get the shakedown. It's hard to get shaken down for not cheating.
You don't really have a leg to stand on in that instance,
Now, at the end of the scene, we see this man standing in the rain in the hoodie. And if we remember, I didn't mention this, but if we remember when we watched the movie, at the end of Danny Atlas revealing the card on the building, on the side of the building, we see a man in a hoodie in the crowd. Now, a hoodie man is standing in the rain after Merritt's trick. I feel like that's more conspicuous. You get the feeling he doesn't want to be seen, because when we only see him from behind, we never see his face. His hoodie's pulled up, and he's always kind of off to the side. But I feel standing in the rain, very obvious. You could have
Yeah,
like
but
sat at a
everyone else,
table.
the people who are doing the tricks, they're so obsessed with, making sure the trick goes well that, if somebody isn't in front
They
of
don't
them
notice a man standing in the rain.
being tricked. Look,
He's getting poured on.
they just want to get their bag, and he is not actively giving them a bag. So they're going to move on real quick.
Anyway,
Also,
now
if
we
you
get
start picking at little things like that, you're going to have a heck of a time with the rest of the movie.
Eleanor. See what I had to because I watched this movie so many times. I know what happened. You see, I didn't take notes on what happened in the scenes. I just remember.
Oh, God. I will say
and then we get to the best kind of magic and the best character in the whole movie. Okay. And I'm not biased at all. Genuinely. I do think this is what made me a fan of Dave Franco, though, because I don't think I liked him before this. But Dave Franco shows up, and he hops on the little ferry, and he's like, I'll give $100 to anyone who can tell me how this... Dave Franco's name is Jack Wilder, because of course it is. So Jack gets on the ferry, and he's like, I'm going to give $100 to anyone who can tell me how this trick works. Here I have an ordinary spoon, some from random diner on 15th Street. I think he says something like that, right? And he like taps the spoon against the railing so everyone can hear it. And he's like, I'm now going to bend this with my mind, which I'm not exaggerating. He says it exactly like that.
Yes. And it's beautiful.
And then he holds the spoon up and he bends it. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then this guy comes out the crowd and then shows that he's got a spoon and like half a spoon hidden in his sleeve. And that's how you do the trick. And he's like, and the guy's kind of aggressive about it, right? And Jack Wilder's like, oh, come on, I got so many other tricks. And the guy's like, or you could give me your $100. And everyone in the crowd's like, yeah, you said you would. Which I think was fair. I don't think the man had to be so rude about it. But like, he did say he would give him $100 if someone could say how he did the trick. So he did. You gotta own up to that. And then I wrote, my favorite kind of magic is thievery. Because then Jack is like, all right, fine. He gives the guy $100 and he like hustles off the ferry before it takes off. And as the ferry's taking off, the guy who found out how he did the trick was like, wait, my watch, my wallet. And he's trying to get people to stop Jack Wilder because Jack Wilder took off with his watch and wallet. But guess what? No one does. Stops him. But as Jack is hustling off the ferry, he bumps into someone. Who is it? Hoodie Man. We still haven't seen his face. Remember this for later.
I just want to say, the first time I saw Hoodie Man, call me American, I was convinced he was going to just start shooting. Because I had no idea. Coming into this movie, this is not the first time I've watched it, but the very first time I watched it, Kalina wouldn't tell me anything about it. She would just tell me that it's the best movie in the world.
I don't think I said that.
Not very helpful.
I've reserved for Spirit, the Stallion of the Cimarron, which I made Eleanor watch. Now, I will say now you see me pretty close up there.
Okay, yes. Sorry. You just hyped it up. Maybe you didn't use the word best, but like you wouldn't tell me a lot about it. You just were like, it's good, I promise. So I didn't know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know what to expect. I thought he was going to start shooting, and he did not. Which I can't say I was disappointed about. But that's my only commentary on Hoodie Man.
Next one, her name is Henley.
That's her name?
Yeah, what did you think her name was?
I didn't know. I thought her name was Haley, and then I thought it was something stupid. But it's something stupid, so I was right.
Yeah, her name's Henley. And she's like she's like in like some weird warehouse or something, okay? Real magic takes place in warehouses and street corners, personally speaking, and ferries and retirement homes in Florida. That's the list. That's the comprehensive list. Anyway, she's in like this warehouse and it's packed, right? And she's like standing on top of this giant tank full of water. And she's like, I'm gonna hop. Now, I don't watch the scene as closely because the gist of it is basically she's gonna be handcuffed to the bottom of the tank. Hands and feet. And then after 60 seconds, they're gonna drop piranhas on her. So what happens here is she's having a hard time getting out, and then she gets out and she gets to the top and she gets a gasp of air, but the time has run out on her right as she takes her breath. So then all the piranhas drop on her, And everyone's like, oh my God. And they're like trying to help her get out. And then the water turns red. And then we see Hoodie Man standing in the crowd. And then all of a sudden we hear this girl yelling, oh, this is such a bad trick. Like, anyone who would come up with this is a sick sadist. And then we pan to the person who's yelling, and it's her, drenched, like soaking wet, because she just got out of the tank full of piranhas. But she's in the crowd yelling about how this is a horrible trick. And everyone's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I feel like with close-up magic, it's easier to feel cheated because, like, if you look back, right, there's piranhas, the water turned red, no one could see her anymore. Real easy for her to, I'm not saying it's easy to escape from a tank full of water in a room full of people. Okay, I'm not saying that it's easy. It is easier to hide that, you know, with all that's going on.
There are
Everyone's
a lot more
freaking
layers to like look at, yeah.
Versus if I'm pickpocketing you while giving you $100 and you don't realize till 30 seconds later.
It's a little bit more impressive, yeah.
Now, back to my beef with Danny Atlas. He's not that hot. Even if you think Jesse Eisenberg is cute and you think magic is cool, he was not hot enough for this next scene because he takes the girl who he's doing the card trick with home, and she is all over him in every sense of the word. He's not that cute.
Again, but if he is essentially a pop star, he is. You know, you gotta think about it. If he is essentially, you know, an up and coming musician who in this universe will be rich from doing all his magic soon, that adds to the hotness, okay?
How rich can he be?
Hot.
He's doing magic on a street corner.
Okay, he's gonna be picked up by a big magician label soon, and his trick album will come out.
His what? His trick album. All right, everyone, comment below the name of Eleanor and I's trick album, please.
Well, it also, like, I'm just saying, it makes sense, and if you read him as a future pop star, it makes sense that...
It makes sense in Eleanor's very convoluted theory, yes, I will give you that.
It's not a convoluted... It's backed up by facts and figures.
It's not backed up by facts. In fact, it is backed up by the absence of facts, which I don't think qualifies.
The fact is that I think it's true.
Anyway, she's like, this girl's all over him. And then she calls him Magic Man. And if I were Danny Atlas, I would have made her leave after that. But then he notices this card on his table. And he just shoves her off of him and then tells her to leave. And she's like, oh my God, is this like some sort of sick trick you do? You get girls up here and then tell them to leave? And he's like, yeah, whatever, I'll call you. And she's like, you don't have my number. Which, like, girl,
like, you don't have my number.
But she's like, you don't have my number. And he's like...
Yeah, she's, like, very insistent that they stay and sleep together. But, like, if he would shove you off of him...
It's not gonna be fun.
For some random card.
I don't even think she knew why he shoved her off. But she's like, you don't have my number. And he's like, I'm a magician. I'll figure it out. Close the door behind you.
I'm a magician. I'll find it.
And he's looking at this card, and he gets on the... It looks like a tarot card almost. And he's got the lover.
It is a tarot card.
Well, it's not a tarot card because I don't think tarot cards have addresses on the back, Eleanor. So...
Okay, fine. It's a picture of a tarot card with something else on the back.
That's like that photo of a pipe that is like, this is not a pipe. It's a photo of a pipe. Shut up. Anyway, it looks like a tarot card, and it says the lover, and then he turns it over, and there's an address and a date and a time on the back. And then we get to Jack Wilder. He's standing on the beach. He's, like, checking his haul from pickpocketing this guy. And in his back pocket, which, like, I guess if you're a pickpocket, you check your pockets often, but, like, it would have taken me ages to check my back jeans pocket. But he checks his pocket, and he finds a card in there, and his says death, and then same address, date, time on the back. Then Merritt gets his card. His is the Hermit. And then Henley finds her card floating in the tank of piranhas that she had fallen into. Because water. Where else would you put it? And hers is the High Priestess.
Yeah, I would find something in my back pocket pretty easily because I put things in a lot of my pockets. I would not, if I had just escaped from a thing, I wouldn't go back and like check on the piranhas.
Yeah, I'm like, why didn't the piranhas... Like, I know piranhas eat flesh, but like, they wouldn't have like tested it out first. Wouldn't the water have destroyed? Anyway, a lot of questions. Not important to the plot at all.
Well, it's magic.
It's magic.
You have to remember that.
Anytime we're confused, that's what we're going to say. It's magic. Anyway, we see Henley pulling up to this building, and then a cab pulls up behind her. Danny Atlas climbs out, and he's like, "Hey, Henley." Oh my God, they know each other. So, back to what I was saying before.
You'll never guess why they know each other.
What I was talking about before, and I cut myself off before he introduced Henley, is, about the four of them working together. Merritt and Atlas kind of butt heads because Atlas is a butthead. And then I came up with that on the spot.
I can tell.
And then Henley and Danny used to work together, and Henley used to be his assistant. We find out in a few minutes, but she used to be his assistant. And now she's doing her own show, and there's some tension around why she left and stopped being his assistant. So they also have some issues. And then Jack Wilder just loves Danny Atlas, which, like, do better, Jack. Okay, I love you, but, like, pick a better idol.
I love him. He walks up and he's like, "Oh my God, Danny Atlas, I've seen every trick you've ever done." And, like, again, who's the only person you would ever say that to? A musician. Thank you.
I hate that you're right. Maybe they don't have actors. Maybe they just don't have famous actors. And they're like, you know how, like, you'd be like, "Oh my God, I've seen every movie you've ever been in." Except this one is, "I've seen every trick album you put out."
Maybe they don't have actors or musicians. Maybe it's just the world's most boring universe. So they have to fucking go back to magicians. Okay. But just real quick before I give it back to you. Harry Potter would have been better if this is the kind of magic they did.
They're going off to David Blaine Magic School in Scotland. Anyway, before Jack shows up and opens the door for them, they're up there and they're talking, and Merrick's, like, doing his mentalist stuff on them, but, like, for fun. And Danny Atlas is like, "Oh, let me just tell you, I know what you do, and it's, I don't think it's real magic, blah, blah, blah." And he's just being obnoxious. And Merrick's like, "Oh, I can see why you two aren't a couple anymore." And they're like, "Oh no, we weren't a couple. I used to be his assistant." And then Danny and Henley get in an argument about, like, why she couldn't be his assistant anymore because she couldn't fit in the space that he had cut out for her to, like, hide in. And she was like, and at one point she goes, "Do you know how hard it is to stay in those tiny little costumes?" And Danny Atlas goes, "No, I'm the main attraction. Shut up."
Which, like, no, he's not.
He is. I do suppose, though, that Danny and Henley are probably the most famous out of all four of them, because you get the feeling that Merritt, like, used to be, because, like, even on his poster it's a photo of young him. It's like he used to be really famous.
That he did used to be really famous, but somebody stole all his money, and then he was left all sad.
And Jack is very clearly, like, up and coming street magician, so he walks up and he's like, "Oh my God, you're my hero." And yeah, they go, "The door's locked." And then he goes, "Oh no, nothing's ever locked." And then he pulls out his lock picking kit. But I wrote down, remember that nothing's ever locked. That's very important. It comes into play later. So a lot of foreshadowing in this movie. I think this movie, foreshadowing wise, very well done, because it's a lot of little things that, like, it's not even obvious when they come into play later, but they all do. And then, that's not a spoiler, there is a big plot twist, and I won't tell you what it is, but there is a big plot twist. But even when you watch the movie back, it doesn't spoil the plot twist for you. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't, you don't watch the movie back and go, "Oh, that was super obvious that was what was happening," At least I don't think so.
There were a couple moments where, like, because the only thing I remembered about this movie was the plot twist. So there were a couple times where I was like, "Oh, now that I know, that's really obvious." But it wasn't, like, super, super glaring, even, like, knowing what was gonna come.
Mm. Like, every time I watch it and I get to the end, I'm like, that was just, who would have known? It's me, because I've seen the movie 10 times. But now, I love any Four Horsemen and the Seven Deadly Sins imagery, connotations. We talked about this, and by talked about it, I mean I made it up on the spot when we did Scott Pilgrim, who I think falls into the Scott Pilgrim and Jesse Eisenberg fall into the same category of man. Well, not Scott Pilgrim. Michael Cera and Jesse Eisenberg fall into the same category of
100%. That
man.
is correct. Yes.
But in Scott Pilgrim, Ramona's got 7 evil exes, and I said that they were the 7 deadly sins. So here, basically, they're in this apartment and they're like trying to figure out who called them there, and the apartment's really grimy. Like, if I saw the bathroom, I would have left because it was just gross. And I said, this is how you join the list of a serial killer's victims, because it's just this like unfurnished, rundown looking apartment. And there's a card on the floor, and they pick it up, and it says, "Now you don't," which should have been the name of the sequel to this movie. Just irrelevant side note. And Merritt does what I think is one of the funniest things he does in the whole movie. He, like, puts his hand to his head like he's doing his mentalist trick. He's like, hang on. And then there's a long pause, and everyone's looking at him. He goes, yeah, I got nothing. And Danny Atlas is like, thank you for the delay. And he was like, I'm just trying to create the space for wisdom. And Danny Atlas goes, oh, so you're like Buddha if he wasn't so enlightened. And then Merritt goes, and you're like Jesus if he was arrogant and all of his miracles were fake. Which, like, is fair. And then they're like, and then what's her name, Henley's like, Danny, be honest, did you do this? And he's like, no. And he asked Jack, did you do this? And Jack's like, no, I wish. He's so cute. Then after the title screen, they're in Las Vegas. They're doing a big show, and they are called the Four Horsemen. I'm trying to get back to why I brought up the Four Horsemen earlier. Basically, if we're going with the Four Horsemen analogy, because that's the name of their little magic group, I broke down who was who. Now, Jack got the death card. So, obviously, he is death. I felt like that one was pretty obvious.
Yes, I would agree.
Put 2 and 2 together. And I want everyone to remember Jack gets the death card because that's very important later. Now, Danny gets the lover card. And I said that was conquest. Because I felt like, you know, if you think about his relationship with Henley and how he likes to be in charge. And then Danny's kind of like the unofficial leader of the Four Horsemen as well. So he has conquested them. I know that's not how you say it, but, you know, he's conquest. Then I said Merritt got the hermit card, so he would be famine, because I associate being a hermit with not necessarily having all the luxuries of life. So he'd probably be the most likely to starve.
Okay.
And then Henley is the high priestess, and what was left was war, so she's war. Which I suppose if you're going into war, you want the magic on your side. Anyway, I love any 4. There was no reason for me to do that. I just really like Four Horsemen and 7 Deadly Sins.
Well, the reason is because you've seen this movie a million times. Your mind was allowed to wander while you watched it.
I needed to do something to keep it interesting. And then I said, is there magic? So basically, when the movie opens, it's like New York, Monday. And then when we see them in Las Vegas, it's like 1 year later, and they're in Vegas, obviously. And I was surprised it was only a year. Like, is there magic? Are they really that good at magic? Or did, like, you know, the clout, because we've decided Danny's the most famous. And if we're going with Eleanor's argument of them being the equivalent of musicians and actors, did Danny's clout just help them get famous that fast? Because I feel like going from performing in what looks like a not very visited vacation spot and, like, the Ferry in New York to a sold out stadium in Las Vegas, very different things, and, like, a year seems like a very short timeline.
Well, I think it was probably 6 months of intense practice and then 6 months of extreme publication. Remember, they have a very, very rich and famous benefactor who probably put, you know, millions of dollars into, you know, publicity and got them on, you know, Jimmy Fallon, maybe got them on Conan O'Brien. You know, I think a year is a good enough time, especially because you have to remember the internet exists, and assuming it exists in this timeline, which it does, you know, they had like one trick go viral on 2013.
Yeah, true.
They had one that like went viral on Twitter and Instagram, and then they were booked, and then just each show they kept upping the ante, so people were like, oh my goodness, what are they gonna do next? Which leads us to what they do in their big, like, sold out show.
And I do remember a little later they say that most of the stadium was like people, their benefactor, his name is Arthur Tressler, paid
Seat
to like be
fillers.
there just to fill up the place. So that makes sense. Now again, Danny, unofficial leader, he's kind of like, guiding the conversation and the show so that they get to the end point. I still think, and everyone's like cheering for Danny. Realistically, Jack would have been the most popular. He's the youngest. He's objectively the best looking. I think if you want to put him and I that lady together, whose name I can't say, Henley together, they're the best looking. But like, he's young, he's a dude. The girls be all over him, right? Not saying that there wouldn't be Danny hype, but like, I just think Jack would have been the most popular member in the group. And I don't think that's biased. But I do think Danny makes a good leader. I do think he's a good choice for being the unofficial, like, group person in charge. And then we see, remember on the internet a while ago when everyone was like, who always understands the assignment? Who has the range? I've decided today that every single person was wrong unless you put Morgan Freeman. Because you know who always understands the assignment? Morgan Freeman.
I think, and Clean and I have talked about this a lot before, half of Morgan Freeman is just the way that he says lines and not necessarily his character.
That's the assignment.
The assignment is being able to talk?
The assignment is sounding like Morgan Freeman. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, he always 100% nails that.
Yeah, what happened? The reason I said that is because I was thinking about Shawshank Redemption and like how he goes from that playing a character that I think arguably was well liked and like, kind of not an underdog, but like you're rooting for him even though he's in prison, versus here he plays a guy who very quickly becomes annoying. And like, I wasn't annoyed because I was like, I love Morgan Freeman, but like, he's not like a good guy in this movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, so they're doing their show and they're talking, and while they're talking, they're like, they're like, we'd like to thank our benefactor, Arthur Tressler, and they make him stand up, and they're like, he's the reason we're here. And Arthur Tressler, who's played by Michael Caine, who is probably most famous for playing Alfred in Batman. So we all know what Alfred Caine sounds like. He's got the gusto. Alfred Caine also kind of plays himself, to be fair, because he's got a very distinct voice, I think. But anyway, he stands up and he's like, if you turn out to be half as good as you think you are, this will be fine. And I said, half as good? Have you not seen them perform before? Why did he say it like that?
But question, then they go, he had to. Okay, I think I'm just coming up with this on the fly. He has like a young hip niece or granddaughter who is like grandfather or uncle. I think for my birthday you should give them a sold out show. Or like, I think I'll convince, my mother to love you again if you give them a show. He's gotta like, it's definitely, he didn't wake up and was like, yeah, let's do this, because that'd be ridiculous. I think, he had some outside force compelling him.
The outside force was, I can make money off of this.
Or he's hypnotized. Yeah, because like, in this universe, nobody would be like, in our hometown universe of Earth, no one would think magician when they think money grab. They would think viral song. Which again,
there's no musicians in this universe.
Exactly.
And so they're like, okay, now for our final trick, we're gonna do something that's never been done on a Las Vegas stage. And then Jack goes, or any stage for that matter. And then Danny goes, we're going to rob a bank. And everyone's cheering because, of course. And so they have like these, Henley, Merritt, and Jack all have like these little bins filled with like bingo balls almost. And
yeah, they're just ping pong balls with numbers and letters on them.
And the audience is picking, and they pick a ball, and each of the three horsemen pass it to Danny, and he's like, okay, we're in section B, row 5, seat 13. And who's in B 513? And it's this Frenchman, and they're like, okay, what's your bank? And he's like, the Credit Republicain de Paris. And Danny goes, well, we were hoping for something a little more local, like a mom and pop credit union with no security. But a promise is a promise. So they bring Etienne up on stage, and that's when this is while they thank Arthur Tressler as he's coming up to the stage. And then Merritt just chest punches the man. he just like hits him in the chest and hypnotizes him, which we only get like for a second, but he hits him in the chest, says something to him, and after they finish thanking Arthur Tressler, Etienne, who's the man whose bank we're robbing, stands up and he's fine. And
I don't like magic. I feel like I should say that. I don't like magic. I think they did a good job, but like,
this was Eleanor's idea to watch this movie.
I know it was my idea to watch this movie, and I thought I do like this movie, but like the magic parts weren't my favorite. I know it's half of the movie.
That's the entire point of the movie. What do you mean half the movie? That's the whole movie.
No, there's also friendship. For a little bit, if you squint.
Anyway, they put this man in a contraption, and they put this little teleportation helmet on his head.
Which is the best part of the whole movie, is the helmet. It looks ridiculous, and I love it, and I kind of want one.
So they put him in the machine, and the machine looks like it squashes him. But then all of a sudden we get live, because the teleportation helmet also has a camera. And then we get a live feed of Etienne, and he's like, oh my God, I'm in the bank vault in Paris. And we see him walking around this bank vault. There's a whole bunch of cash just stacked in the middle of the floor. And Danny goes, oh my God, that looks like 3 million euro in cash. Danny Atlas, how do you know what $3 million in cash, 3 million euro in cash looks like? I'm genuinely wondering.
Why would a bank, I know it's behind a vault, but why would a bank just leave just a pallet of cash out like that? Surely they wouldn't schedule their cash deliveries for the very end of day that they have to leave it for the next morning. That's true. They're friends. It hit 4:30 and they're like, nope, we have to go. Sorry, 3:30 and they're like, just got back from lunch, gotta go home.
Hours is my understanding of the French, and they believe in long lunches. So anyway, they're like, oh my God, that looks like 3 million euro in cash. And so earlier, before they sent him off to Paris, they had Etienne sign a little card and had his ticket from the show. So they tell him to drop that at the bottom of the pallet and then hang on and then press a little button on the side of his helmet. And then like this tunnel starts and it sucks up all the money. And then euros are just flying in this building in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay. And they're like just giving away euros. Like, can you imagine being a bank the next day? Because I assume this show is at night, right? This is just a whole bunch of people are coming in with as many euros as they could have grabbed falling out the sky. Like, can I exchange these, please? And then you go to look up the numbers, and then it's like, oh, these were stolen from a bank in Paris this morning.
There's one really, really lucky person who had a flight booked to somewhere in Europe the next day. Mm-hmm. And they were like, that's so awesome. That's just my whole vacation bankrolled.
They're like going through. They're like, no, I have nothing to declare. Please ignore the 10,000 euro in my carry-on. Anyway, where did the Frenchman go? And how do we get him back? Because we do not see him again. At least not in this scene.
Well, obviously, they kill him.
Because, like, I don't think he could have gotten sucked up by the little teleportation tunnel that took the money. But, like, where was he?
They drug him, and then they put him back in his house. And then they're like, that's so crazy. Teleportation, it'll exhaust you.
Then we get to one of my favorite. I didn't know he was one of my favorite men, but every time I see him in a movie, I'm like, oh my God, I love this man. Mark Ruffalo. Out here playing an FBI agent, because of course he is. And he gets a call, and he's like, I don't think I heard you right. You said magic? And the person on the phone's like, yeah. And he's like, so he shows up to the office, and he's like, I've been working on this case for, like, some other case for months. I'm so close to cracking it. I do not want to deal with a bunch of magicians. And he's, like, trying to pawn it off on people.
And then we meet another character who, again, I guess I get why she was there.
Nope, this is stupid.
She's an Interpol agent. Well, she was there because the bank that got robbed.
I know why
was
the character was. Yeah, I do know why the character was there.
She's an Interpol agent, and she was like, I believe in magic, and I also believe I need that money back. And that's like her whole thing for the whole movie.
It's just so like so Mark Ruffalo's character, I think his name is Rhodes. So Agent Rhodes is like storming into his boss's office, and he's like, I don't need this. And then the little French lady who no one saw before now was like, they took 3 million euro. And then like there's this pause, and you can tell with the pause she's gonna be his love interest. This movie doesn't need a love interest. There's so many things happening,
and like I feel like it could need a love interest if they did something with it, but they didn't do anything with it.
Or like maybe a love interest for one of the 4 main characters. But like,
yeah, there was like a little bit, some tension throughout the movie with Redhead and Social Network Boy. But like Mark Ruffalo's, whatever. Mark Ruffalo's love interest, just like
they spent half the movie arguing.
What?
They spend half the movie arguing.
Oh yeah, they do. They like, first of all, they don't like each other. And second of all, there's only one very specific part of the film where she's even... So basically, we're going to jump ahead real quick. Because it's my show and I say so. Is it okay if I jump ahead real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. But basically, Mark Ruffalo has to hunt the magicians. And it's like, one of the big climax scenes where the magicians are going to pop up on top of a building somewhere, and half of the team is going one way, and the little French girl is like, no, they're going the wrong way. And so then he's like, you're so right. And one of the other people is like, you can go with her, it's okay. And like, that's the only time she matters to the plot at all.
Yeah, well, he needed someone to yell at, I guess, and he was doing a lot of that. You know what I would have not have found attractive? A man yelling at me every 5 minutes. Because he was going through his own stuff.
You know who he could have yelled at? Anybody. He didn't have to yell at a lady. No. I think ladies get yelled at enough, and I'm comfortable going on record to say that.
I'm not, so I'm going to move very quickly on. I did like their partnership, but yeah, there was really no point in it going beyond that. And like I said, they argued half the time. This is the first time I watched this movie that I knew what her name was. Would you believe that? I've mentioned this movie
I don't know her
10
name.
Times. Yeah, I was paying attention on purpose this time. Her name is Alma, and he's Agent Rhodes. And the French lady says that the banks won't take the not the French lady. I'm sorry. So we get into an interrogation room because she's like, "Oh, I interviewed the French guy already," and he's like, "Oh, really? You interviewed my witness already?" And she's like, "What do you mean your witness? You just said you didn't want this case." And he's like, "Well, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna go interview him now. Is that okay?" And he's being really condescending. She's like, "Yeah." So they go to interview the Frenchman, even though she's told him the Frenchman is useless and doesn't know anything. And he's like,
guess what?
He's useless and doesn't know anything. And Etienne, our little Frenchman, is like, "I've never stolen anything in my life, and I've tried to give the money back, but they won't take it." Why won't they take the money back? Also, did he get is he in possession of the money? Because last we saw the money, it was just blowing around.
When we saw like the vacuum turn up, he was grabbing some bills. So I'd have to imagine he's in possession of at least a few €100.
All right, fair enough.
But like he definitely doesn't have all of it. But yeah, why would?
Yeah.
Because I get catching the people who took the money is important, but you can take the money back too.
Mm-hmm. And like, especially if you're not getting all of it back.
Get as much as you can.
Sorry.
They're not going to just forget about the money.
Yeah, exactly. They're not going to forget it got stolen. They're still going to want to find out who did it. But, so he's like, "So how did you go from Las Vegas to Paris?" And the Frenchman's like, "Magic." And understandably, Agent Rhodes does not like that answer. So he's like, "This is BS." I do love this little bit because that's a trigger word for some of the hypnosis Merritt did, so that Etienne now believes he's in the Philharmonic. So he stands up on the desk and is playing his little violin. What's funny is we hear the classical music. Obviously in the room they were not hearing the music. So,
I do really like that they let us hear it.
Yeah. And so then they leave the room with the French guy, and they're like having still having an argument because Agent Rhodes is being a meanie face. And when they finally come to an agreement, but like as they're arguing, we see we see like Jack in one interrogation room. It's like that, that double-sided glass that like interrogation rooms have. So they're looking at Jack. Me too, Jack. Jack is sleeping. He's got his feet kicked up on the table. He's handcuffed to the table. And he's asleep. Because, like, you got to get your 8 hours in while you can. You know what I mean?
You really do. Especially, he is potentially entering a high-stress situation. You got to sleep before that.
Mm-hmm. And then and they move over to Henley's room, and they're still arguing. And she's, like, just spinning this chair around, but, like, without touching it. And then Agent Rhodes finally gets off his high horse, and he's like, okay, fine. Which one of these guys do you want to talk to first? And they decide to talk to Merritt. And now Agent Rhodes, one of the other FBI agents, comes up to him before he goes in the room. He's like, I just want you to know, like, mentalism has never been proven to be real. And, like, so whatever he says in there, like, just ignore him, because mentalism's not real. And we've talked about this before, but remember what we've said about, like, acting suspicious? Mm-hmm. And, like, maybe if you didn't do all that groundwork before when Agent Rhodes went in the room, he probably wouldn't have believed Merritt. Because Merritt starts talking about how, I guess, the other agent and his wife have a deal where on Tuesdays, the agent dresses up like a lady. But, like, if he hadn't been so adamant that mentalism wasn't real 30 seconds before, I probably would have just been like, that man's crazy. Because Rhodes doesn't believe in magic. Rhodes already doesn't like this guy. He probably would have just been like, oh, he's trying to piss me off, and then moved on.
Which, like, is his attitude for every other second of the entire movie.
The rest of the scene is, like, cut between the two of them interviewing Merritt and him, like, doing his mentalism, and them interviewing Danny, and Danny just being arrogant. And I get the feeling that they went to interview Merritt first, as we see, and he probably annoyed him so much so that they left him and talked to Danny, and then Danny proceeded to fully piss him off.
It's a great piece of I do like a good interrogation sequence.
Yeah, me too.
So it was very good for that. But if I were Mark Ruffalo, I would have quit my job. I know he couldn't for reasons we will get to, but if I wouldn't care, I wouldn't want that money back. I'd be like, I need you to stop talking to me like that. I gotta go.
Real quick, I'm sorry to the audience. Eleanor, how have we been here for like an hour? And we're not even halfway through the movie.
I feel like it's been 15 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna speed this up a little bit. Now, I hate to say it but Danny is right, because Agent Rhodes is like, we're gonna get you and we're gonna arrest you, and Danny's like, no, you're not, because you're gonna have to. Who's gonna take magic to a jury? Is basically his justification. He's like, if you arrest us, you're gonna have to. The FBI on an institutional level is admitting that magic is real. You're not going to do, like, who's going to take you seriously? You're going to look like idiots.
And he is right.
Yes. And I said, Danny is making good points, but could he be more pretentious about it? But, like, probably. And then he does one of the coolest things. I will forgive him, because the next part is so cool, is Rhodes gets mad and he stands up and he slams his hands on the desk, and Danny switches the handcuffs from his hands to Rhodes. And then he turns to Alma, the French lady, and he's like, what's wrong with that soda, miss? And she shakes the soda, and you hear something clacking around in there. And she opens the soda and pours it out on the table, and a key drops out. And what I was wondering, has popped up for me before, is how much of, like, this was planned in the apartment and how much they came up with on their own. Like, obviously, robbing the bank was in the plans in the apartment. Like, that had to be, right? But, like, the fine details, like, how did he know there was going to be a soda? Like, if there was no soda, where did he put the key? Like, was that left up to them in the moment?
Yeah, I think, like, some of the smaller things like that were left up to their skills. They were possibly, like, just given an objective. Mm-hmm. Or, as we come to learn, I'm sure that if the soda was an integral part of it, somebody was there to make sure that the soda... Because I'm pretty sure Mark Ruffalo gives him the soda. If I'm remembering correctly, Mark Ruffalo gives him the soda.
I don't know. I thought she had the soda and it was just left on the table. But I remember Mark Ruffalo was drinking... Because Mark Ruffalo was drinking a soda and eating chips earlier, but this one was like a closed soda.
I think
pop the tab to pour the key out.
It was planned, or if not, they were like given this is what you have to do, play to your own magical abilities to get there, sort of thing.
Yeah. So then next they go to visit Morgan Freeman. I remember I brought up Morgan Freeman and didn't explain why I brought up Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman's in the audience, And he plays this character who used to be a magician, but now his life's work is like filming musicians and debunking their tricks, and he like sells DVDs on this and makes tons of money on it. So the French lady and Mark Ruffalo go to visit him, and he takes them to the stadium. I keep calling it a stadium. That's not the right word, but he takes them to the stadium.
Yeah, whatever. It's a
exactly right.
Theater.
He takes them to the stadium and shows them how they did the trick. No, it's like a. Anyway, he shows them how they did the trick. So he makes Mark Ruffalo put the little teleportation helmet on, puts him in the little machine, and then he gets dropped into the French bank. Except now there's no cash there, and then the vault to the bank door opens, and it turns out they're still in the stadium. Everyone has just come down the stairs. So basically, it turns out that the Four Horsemen built a replica of this Frenchman's bank. Went to Paris. Now, when were they in Paris? Could the FBI not have checked that they had all been in Paris and, like, put 2 and 2 together?
I would have to imagine that they were in Paris no, because they weren't in Paris at different times. Maybe...
No, they all had to be at the same time. Because what happens is, Arthur Tressler, who's the character... No, that's not Arthur Tressler. What's his name? His name's, like, Thaddeus. I'm going to call him Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman explains that they go to Paris, and they subconsciously plant Las Vegas in this man's mind. So Etienne, who's our French guy who robbed the bank, Merritt passes him first and says, "Viva Las Vegas," and Etienne kind of looks at him weird. And then Danny Atlas passes him on the stairs, flicking like a casino chip in front of him so he can see Las Vegas, and then grabs it right in front of his face. And then Henley bumps into him and says sorry. And she, like, touches his chest in his hands and goes, "Oh, sorry, pardon, monsieur." And then she walks by, and then she goes, "I got his measurements," which is how they got the measurements for the teleportation helmet and the little machine they put him in.
Which, like, how many...
Yeah, I have a lot
How many different helmet sizes are there?
No, my thing is, how did she... Because it wasn't like she, like, held on to him for a long time. She was like, tap, tap, and then it's like, got his measurements. How?
Technology.
I would love to have a skill like that, because that's insane. Anyway... And then, earlier, he's like, so how'd they rob... Mark Ruffalo's like, so how'd they rob the bank? And Morgan Freeman's like, oh, they didn't rob the bank. So then they talk about how there's no money in the bank. And he's like... and then Mark Ruffalo goes, you said they didn't steal the money. And Morgan Freeman goes, I didn't say they didn't steal the money. I said they didn't rob the bank. So it turns out what they did is they slipped... I don't know how. Danny and Henley, like, slip themselves under the like, pallet that the money's being transported in, and end up in the armored truck, which I think is a little callback to when Henley was like, do you know how small you have to be to fit into these tiny little spaces? So they're on the armored truck. Merritt hypnotizes the guy driving the armored truck, and Henley knocks the guy that's in the truck out, and then they steal the money, the 4 of them, because Jack's there with the car. So they steal the money out the truck, and they replace it with what's called flash paper. And flash paper burns and doesn't leave any smoke or residue. And also, that's how they... remember I mentioned earlier, the little Frenchman had left like a card and his ticket stub for the show. In the pallet, that's how they got those to be in the real bank in France. Is when they went to France, they just got his signature on a card, and I guess they just left a random ticket because they had him.
Yeah, they had the tickets beforehand, and then they got his ticket, his signature from his credit card, which I think very smart, and is also a callback to I don't remember if it happened before or after, but the whole getting something way beforehand to
that happens
make
after.
Magic with later.
Yeah, that happens after.
That's when,
so remember
that's
that
when the idea starts.
Now, this is the only time I think that Mark Ruffalo and the French lady are cute, is they're on the plane to Louisiana, which is where the Four Horsemen are doing their next show, and she's practicing card tricks, and she goes, is this your card? And he goes, no, my card's over there on that guy's lap, because in her shuffling, it, like, flew out the deck, and then she tries it again, and she goes, is this your card? And he goes, yeah, and it's very obvious he's lying, and she's like, really? And he's like, yeah, and she's, like, just so pleased with herself. And he's, like, smiling a little bit. That was the only time I was like, maybe this is cute. And then the rest of the movie, bad.
Not cute.
Yeah.
It's not like they're not cute. It's just so unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
And like this movie had so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't need more, you know?
Now, while they're on this, like, Mark Ruffalo and the French lady are on this plane, this, like, commercial plane cramped together, the Four Horsemen are, like, just chilling on Arthur Tressler's private jet. And they're all, like, and I know we're trying to go faster because we've kept you here for a while, but this part's important because, Danny's like, oh, mentalism's easy. He's, like, goading, Merritt because Merritt's flirting with Henley and Danny doesn't like it. So he's like, I can do it.
Like,
so
that's enough romance for the whole thing.
Exactly.
Okay. I know Isla Fisher isn't in the sequel and may or may not be in the third one, but like that little romance subplot, that's enough. Okay? We don't need romance everywhere.
So he's like, I can do it, and he's like, okay. And Danny says, I'm gonna read Arthur Tressler's assistant. And Arthur Tressler goes, no, read me. And Merritt, if you notice, he like starts small and builds when he's like doing his mentalism and figuring things about you. Danny just straight up started saying words. He was like, you had a big tough dog and you were a real tough guy. Like, just no foundation, just started saying stuff. And Arthur Tressler was like, nope, I was a prissy and I had a white cat named Snuffles. And then Jack's like, let me try, I could do better, which I agree, he could do better. But Danny goes, no, let me try one more time. And he goes, all right, you had like a real tough uncle. He had a real rapscallion of a name. And he's like, no, I got nothing. And Arthur Tressler's like, my uncle's name was Armitage Cush.
Just the craziest name you could think of. Just the most
like
rich person name in the
Cushman
world.
Or something like that. And they're like, oh, wow, really? That was your childhood? So then they get to...
Which, like, why are they surprised that's his childhood? He's a
My thing was, like, I really like how
with
Danny...
enough free time.
Yeah, Danny doubled down on the big tough guy after he was like, no, I was a prissy and I had a white cat named Snuffles. He's like, okay, well, your uncle was... He just really doubled down on the tough guy thing, even though he was wrong the first time. It was not... it's Cushman Armitage was his name. I got it backwards. It was not Cushman Armitage. And it was not Arthur Tressler. But they get to... So everyone gets to New Orleans. It's Mardi Gras, so, like, no one can find a place to stay. The streets are packed, which is going to cause some problems later. But they go to see them. Mark Ruffalo and the French lady go to see the Four Horsemen perform. And the Four Horsemen are like... we don't get the show in chronological order. We get, like, bits and pieces that all come together. And they say that at the beginning of the show. They're like, they may seem like separate tricks, but the tricks are all connected, which is foreshadowing for the show.
Well, they pose it as a question. They're like, is this one big trick or many different tricks? Which I think was a cute way to do it.
Yeah, and it's foreshadowing not only for the show, but for the end of the movie as well, which we will bring up shortly.
Hopefully.
Or we might bring up in a long time, because we've been here for so long. But basically, the main thing that happens in the show is they rob Arthur Tressler. And I think this is genius, because they have everyone during intermission like fill out how much money is in their bank balance, and then they call out he's like, Merritt's on stage and he's like, okay, everyone yell out your names to me, and he calls 3 random names, and then he quote unquote guesses how much money is in their bank account, and one girl's got like $562. Don't be doing that to people. No one needs to know how much money's in my bank account.
If someone asked me to do that, I would lie.
Yeah.
First of all, and second of all, I
mean,
to be fair, it's not like he asked them,
but
it's not that vital to the whole thing. It's really, truly not.
But she's like, yeah, I got $562, and then someone else had $6,500, someone else had like $1,000 and some money in there. And he's like, oh, but you're all wrong. And they bring Arthur Tressler on stage, and everyone's got like these little tiny pieces of paper where they wrote their bank balance on, and then they bring out this giant check. And Arthur Tressler's got like $144 million on his check. That's how much is in his bank account. And then everyone's got little flashlights under their seat, and they're like, and then Jack brings out a big flashlight and shines it on Arthur Tressler's check, and they're like, oh my god, that's crazy, it's changing. And it goes down by $70,000, and the lady that had $562 in her bank account now has $70,562.
And 62.
And then the more they keep shining the flashlight on the big check, the amount it goes down, someone else's bank account goes up that much, and they take all this money from him. And Arthur Tressler's like, this is just for...
Yeah, and
No, you
he's
go.
like, "Is this just for show or is it for real?" And Isla Fisher, Henley, whatever, is like, "It's for show in the sense that we're doing it on a stage."
Yeah, but then the best bit, right, is so they're like escaping, and Arthur Tressler's like trying to grab money. They handcuff him to the stage, and he's like, "How did you get my money?" And they're like, "Well, we couldn't possibly do that. We would need your password, and if we don't have, and they're like, we don't have your password to get something to get that kind of information. We would need to know things like your first pet's name and your mother's maiden name. Which, if you remember on the plane, what did he tell them? He told them his mother's brother's name, Cushman Armitage, and he told them his first pet was named a white cat named Snuffles, and they were like, yeah, we would have to know that information. And how would we know that information, Arthur Tressler? You certainly wouldn't tell
You
us.
would never give it to us. Yeah.
And then they escape. And earlier in the show, Merritt had hypnotized some people to believe they were on a football team. They had to tackle the quarterback, and the quarterback is the one who says freeze. Now, you know what FBI agents say when you're trying to escape from them and they want you to stop? Freeze.
They say, "Stop." Oh, sorry.
So Mark Ruffalo yells freeze, and then these random people from the audience are like, get the quarterback and tackle him. So he obviously can't run after them. Then we get this big old chase scene. They're running through the streets of New Orleans during Mardi Gras, and like trying to track the Four Horsemen, but they get tricked and they're tracking themselves. And
Which, like, honestly, I've never, held FBI technology, FBI tracking technology. I feel like I would catch on a little bit sooner if they were like, "Oh my goodness, he's turning right where I'm turning." That's crazy.
yeah, like on the little tracker where he was he wasn't tracking himself the entire time, but from when he was, like the tracker and then that where he was showing Mark Ruffalo weren't like quite next to each other, even though he was tracking himself. There was like a gap, and then it took to the end. He's like, "Oh my god, I'm tracking myself," which, like, homie, obviously, yeah, it's been with you this, like, okay. Anyway, best scene is coming up. I know I've been doing a lot of talking. It's just I actually remember what happens in this movie, and my notes make more sense when I explain the scene. But the best scene is coming up. Apparently they've set up shop in the apartment, the first apartment we see them in. They've like set up shop in there for a year because they've got like plans on the wall, and like it's very clearly like this is their head of operations. And the FBI figures this out because they're like, "Oh, we got a one up on them." A lot has happened. Basically, they like think they got a one up on them, and they're tracking them. So they track them to the apartment in New York, and they're back in New York, and they storm this apartment building. And they're just terrorizing the people in this apartment building. Like burst in one lady's door, and she's like holding her baby. They're just like breaking down people's doors randomly.
So it's a very realistic depiction of what law enforcement does.
Fair enough. But right before they burst in, we see the Four Horsemen. They're like trying to pack up the apartment and destroy everything. And Danny says to Jack, "You always wanted to be an adult. It's time to start acting like one," which I thought was rude. But basically, Jack's job is to stay behind and destroy the rest of the evidence while the other three leave. So the three escape, and then Mark Ruffalo and his partner, not the French lady, but this other dude, finally get into the apartment that the Four Horsemen have.
That's his name, the other dude.
Legally, yes. Show up into the apartment that the Four Horsemen had, and they're like looking around, and Jack's hiding, and Jack's almost spooky. He's like hiding on top of a bookshelf, and he like very carefully lowers himself to the ground behind the door behind Mark Ruffalo where he can't see him, and then he just punches the other dude in the face and gets him stuck in the, what's it called, the disposal? I don't have one. You know, the thing in your sink.
The incinerator or whatever. Garbage disposal.
I don't know none of this. He like sticks his jacket.
You don't have one? Like, even at home?
You've been to my house.
I'm sorry, I didn't spend a lot of quality time with your sink.
No, we don't have a garbage disposal.
Oh, that's weird.
I find them weird.
Okay, well,
anyway, we're way over time. So he shoved
so
the guy's jacket into the garbage disposal, so the guy's stuck there. And then he and Mark Ruffalo fight. And I said, Jack Wilder said, punch first, ask questions later. Now, best scene. He gets Mark Ruffalo handcuffed to this table, takes his radio, and Mark Ruffalo's like, what are you doing? And Jack starts mimicking his voice, and he mimics his voice perfectly. And then on the radio, because the radio's like calling to make sure everything's okay, And he's like, all good to hear, move to the next floor. In a perfect imitation of Mark Ruffalo's voice. I'm sure Dave Franco did that himself. Oh, also, Dave Franco is the better Franco brother. That was my note at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, not even a question. He so cute.
He's
so
and I didn't,
cute.
like I said, I didn't love him before I saw this movie, but this movie I was like, maybe he's nice.
And I know, like, the character he's playing in this movie is literally just his character from 21 Jump Street, but with magic.
No, he's smart here. I think he's smarter here.
He's smarter. Yes, okay. But, like, for the most part.
I think this is the smartest character I've seen him play. Because also when he was in Scrubs, not the brightest. He was in medical school.
Transformative actor, we'll say.
No. But this movie understands the definition of Chekhov's gun, okay? Because the theory is that if you show a gun in the scene, it has to go off later. So anything you bring up on screen has to be relevant. Now, if you remember, there was flash paper. Jack starts throwing flash paper at Mark Ruffalo. Then he brings up cards. Now, in the New Orleans show, one of Jack's tricks was he threw a bunch of cards into the crowd and got it to stick on a pencil this audience member was holding. And then another one is he threw the cards in the crowd but, like, cut the pencil in half. Now, he's got a bunch of cards up his sleeve, and Mark Ruffalo goes, really? And Jack Wilder goes, yeah, really. And then starts flicking the cards at him at velocity till they hurt. And then he escapes out the door.
There's a CSI, this is kind of important, I promise. There's a CSI where somebody gets killed because they're in an elevator and somebody throws a playing card through the closing doors and it slices their carotid, and now I'm kind of scared of being killed by a playing card.
Oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't tell you this. I would love to learn how to throw cards like that. I think that's so cool.
Well, you can learn, just I don't want to.
You don't want to be around?
I don't want to help you practice. One time, Kalina made me practice her jujitsu moves with her, and, like, I never want to help you again.
One time, I didn't make Eleanor practice. I just kicked her, and then she had a bruise for a really long time. And she brings it up every single time I see her. She brings it up.
Does it hurt?
In my defense, I didn't know people bruise that easily.
That's racist. I bruise if you look at me.
No, it's not. If you want to make it racist, sure. I don't bruise as easily as Eleanor. I don't think that has anything to do with our skin color.
It might.
I don't think it hurts.
I don't think this is a productive conversation.
Anyway,
I bruise really easily. I'm like a tomato.
You're like a peach. I was gonna tell you to hop in anytime you want, because I'm just basically trying to give the plot to get to the important bits.
I'm hopping in when it's vital.
Now it gets bad. So Mark Ruffalo is driving down the road. Jack has stolen an FBI car. He's racing down the road. They're just racing down the streets of New York. One part I thought was funny. Mark Ruffalo and the French lady are in the car together. She's driving, and he goes, "We're heading east on the FDR," and she goes, "This is not east." Which is what it would be like trying to do a mad escape with Eleanor, okay? Eleanor is directly challenged.
You missed the best part. I think this already happened. She was told got told to stay in the car while they went up to the apartment building. But she got out of the car, and then she realized, like, they had to have a car to leave. And she came up to some guy, and she goes, "FBI," kind of. And just took his
my
keys.
favorite part of that scene is he didn't try to stop her from taking the car at all. He was like, what? He was like on the phone. He's like, "What?" And then she just drove off. And then in the scene where she's driving off, someone's running after her. It's not the man who owns the car. It's the FBI agent who was in charge of watching her. But they're, like, flying down the road. Jack's like, they're just zipping through traffic and cutting across and all this stuff. And they're on the FDR drive. And Jack cuts in front of a bus and then cuts back. Like, he cuts over in front of the bus and they can't see him. And then he cuts back over and it seems like he's safe. And then his car flips and it's just rolling for ages.
It catches on fire. It's rolling. It is going crazy. It has its own little dance number.
Yeah. And so Mark Ruffalo once it stops rolling finally, Mark Ruffalo runs there and tries to save him, but they realize the car's going to explode, so his partner, not the French lady, but the other guy, is like, "You got to get out. You got to save yourself." And so at the last minute, Mark Ruffalo grabs the papers that Jack was escaping with, and they run off as the car explodes. Now, if you remember when I said remember this earlier, Jack got what card?
Death.
And what is Jack now?
Dead.
Yes, you're so smart. Thank you for participating.
Anytime.
So, will you pick this up, please?
So he is dead, and we are all very, very sad. Mm-hmm. But, as they say in New York, the show must go on. They say that everywhere. And so, oh my goodness. So basically, they're having one final show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at the 5 Points in New York. And so, oh god, so much happens. Kalina, you really
Press for time. Okay, I'll pick it back up. It's fine.
Thank you.
They're doing a show, but basically they're like going to go get this safe, right? And they're like, "Oh my god, we have to go get the safe." So the FBI rushes over there because they think they're going to steal the safe. They get there, safe is gone, and the security guard who's in charge of the safe is like, "Oh, you." So the guy, the guy in charge of all of them in this FBI scenario is played by Common, and Common, the security guard in charge of the safe was like, "Oh, you just got a phone call, and then you said to pack the safe up and drive it off," and he's like, "No, I didn't." And one of the other agents in the room goes, "Oh, this is BS." And then guess what Common starts doing?
Because he said BS, Common starts having a little orchestra number.
Now, also, we didn't mention this.
Should I know who Common is?
He's a rapper, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I always think he's T.I., but I know he's not T.I.
And they don't recognize him because...
Anyway, this I didn't mention this earlier, but we did hear when Merritt was like at his prime, one of his tricks was he used to be able to hypnotize people over the phone. And in the scene, the security guard says, "You got a phone call, and then you told us to pack up the safe." And Common's like, "No, I didn't," because Merritt called him, hypnotized him over the phone to tell him to pack up the safe, and then tell him that he was in the Philharmonic if he heard the word BS.
Well, I thought the Philharmonic thing was because, remember at the very beginning, they said that they'd hypnotized half the audience in the first show to pretend they're in the Philharmonic. So I thought...
yeah, that's what the Philharmonic thing was, but it was... Because I was always trying to figure out what the phone call had to do with anything, but I caught it this time, is Merrick was able to hypnotize over the phone. So he called Common and hypnotized him over the phone to, one, tell them about the safe, and two, to the Philharmonic thing.
I thought it was earlier. That, or it was a... spoiler alert, Franco is alive. I thought it was because... I thought it was because he mimicked his voice so perfectly. Because of the whole thing with Mark Ruffalo. But yours makes more sense.
No, it's Merritt called him on the phone and hypnotized him over the phone. That was the first time I caught this. Anyway, so Morgan Freeman's like giving them a play-by-play of how this trick is working, if I remember correctly, and like how they scam them all this stuff. This is a little later, but basically Morgan Freeman's like, here's how they did this. And in their New Orleans show, they showed there's a trick where you put a rabbit in a box and then you close the box and you open the box and the rabbit is gone and the box is empty. But it's just a trick with mirrors, which I never get the mirror trick because like if you walked close enough to the mirror, you'd see yourself. But anyway, that's what they did in the room with the safe.
Absolutely confused me way too much, but yes.
It turns out the safe that they... So basically, they're like, oh my god, they're taking the safe. We're going to follow it. They don't know that we're onto them, but they do know that they're onto them. And they just sent them to follow a fake safe full of stuff, full of balloon animals. The real safe is still in the room with Common while he's playing his little Philharmonic piece. James Franco shows up. Jack Wilder shows up. Not James Franco. The other... Jack Wilder shows up. And it turns out they did the same thing you do with the rabbit in the box. They put a mirror in the room so the room looked empty, but the safe was really behind the mirror. And he breaks into... What was in this? Oh, was the safe the money?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, he gets the safe because he's alive while the three of them, Henley, Danny, and Merritt are, doing their final little hurrah. Trick. And then they, drop a bunch of money over the crowd at one point in time, and I wrote down, where do they get all this cash from? Doesn't withdrawing large amounts of cash put you on a watch list?
Well, no, it's the safe money, I think.
No, it turns out that they've printed money with their face on it.
Smarter.
But if it was real money. Cash, that would get you on a watch list to withdraw all that cash. But anyway, so
I think they're already on a watch list. If that makes you feel any better.
Yeah, but they're like, we're the Four Horsemen. Good night, and they poof off into the air, and the FBI has been chasing their tails. And this is the scene Eleanor mentioned earlier where Mark Ruffalo goes off with the French lady because she's like, they're going in the wrong direction, but which she was right, but they still didn't catch them. So like her being right didn't help anybody.
Mm-mm.
And I'm surprised your man doesn't get fired. But then they're like, if this cash is fake because it's got the Four Horsemen's faces printed on it, where's the real cash? Then we get a scene of Morgan Freeman walking to his car. He unlocks his car. His car doesn't explode, but it bursts open because it's full of all the cash from the safe. And then the police all show up. Now, if I were a cop, I would have been like, this is a little convenient to just every single, like, how did he stuff every single bill into his car? And we just happen to roll up the same time all of the bills are falling out of his car that he's currently walking to. I'd be like, this is too
Obviously,
easy.
they were like, this is really convenient. We don't have to put more work into this arrest. Let's go.
Yeah, that too, because everything they've done with these people has been so difficult. I would have been like, this is just getting handed to us. I feel like I should be suspicious. But yeah, maybe they're like, finally an easy one. So then Morgan Freeman's in jail, but like not like he's in a cell in this abandoned building is what it looks like, okay? And Mark Ruffalo comes to talk to him. And Mark Ruffalo's like, I just don't get it. Like, what was the point of all of this? And that goes back to when they said, is this all, like, is it a bunch of little tricks or are they all connected? Because it turns out Tressler Insurance and the French bank and, like, all of that comes into play. All of that. They weren't just targeting them randomly. Like, they all had something to do with their end goal of revenge, which we'll find out shortly.
Revenge.
But they're like, Morgan Freeman's like, I don't want a profile, I want a name, because Morgan Freeman's like, it's got to be someone really smart and someone who's like just so invested, but like you would never suspect them. And he's like, because he was always ahead of us, he was always one step ahead of the FBI, almost like he was in,
like he was on the.
And then he turns around and Mark Ruffalo's not, because Mark Ruffalo got locked into the cell with him so he could talk to him alone. He turns around, Mark Ruffalo's gone. And then you hear Mark Ruffalo go, on the inside. And Morgan Freeman turns back around. Mark Ruffalo's now on the outside of the cell. And Morgan Freeman's like, it's you. And plot twist of all plot twists, Mark Ruffalo's been the man on the inside this whole time. But Morgan Freeman's like, who are you? And Mark Ruffalo's like, no, I've waited years to see the look on your face. And Morgan Freeman's like, what do you want from me? And Mark Ruffalo goes, I want you to sit in the cell and rot for the rest of your life, essentially. And then he walks off. Just the little, it's almost as if he was on the, and then he turns around and he's gone on the inside. It's so good.
So brilliant.
While this is happening, while we see this scene happening, it's cut in with the Four Horsemen, Henley.
Oh, also, just real quick, do you remember how Kalina said that Morgan Freeman's whole thing was like defrauding magicians? It turns out that the very first magician that he defrauded is Mark Ruffalo's dad, which is the revenge plot. He didn't just wake up and decide to hate Morgan Freeman.
Oh yeah, Mark Ruffalo's dad was named Lionel Shrike, and he got defrauded. And Morgan Freeman's like, it's not my fault he died, but like it kind of is, because basically what he did is to. You go. I've been talking enough.
Yeah, so his whole trick was that he was going to escape from a safe, and that was like his big comeback after being defrauded by Morgan Freeman, I believe. So he got in the safe and got pushed into the water, and then he was going to come up and be like, what? No, he died at the bottom of the river. So basically, Mark Ruffalo blames Morgan Freeman because his dad never would have done the safe trick if he hadn't have been defrauded the first time, because he wouldn't have needed a big comeback.
Yeah, and then that's when Arthur Tressler Insurance had Mark Ruffalo's family's life insurance when his father died, so that's why they targeted him, and so that's how it all comes into. That's why they also picked Tressler to scam and rob. So what we're
and they
seeing,
also. They had something to do with like the manufacturer of the safes had something to do. Like every single person that they targeted had something. To do
and the
with
bank that held the
death.
notes was the Credit Republican of Paris, which is the first bank they robbed. But while we're seeing Mark Ruffalo, while we're getting this reveal of Mark Ruffalo and Morgan Freeman talking to each other, we're seeing Henley, Merritt, and Danny Atlas in Central Park, and they're walking around. They're trying to figure out where they're supposed to go, and they figure out they're supposed to go to this carousel because it turns on, But they're walking around and they see the gate's locked and they go, oh no, it's locked. And then you get my man, Jack Wilder, walking up from the other side of the gate and he goes, oh, weren't you guys listening? Nothing's ever locked. And he unlocks the gate for them. and they go to the carousel, and then that's when they find out that Mark Ruffalo's been behind it the whole time because he's standing out in the front, and he's like, you guys are in, welcome to the Eye. And basically there's been a slight undercurrent that wasn't super important, but the Eye is this secret magic society that accepts people twice a century, and Mark Ruffalo has it, but basically to get inducted into the Eye, you have to follow a series of instructions with blind faith, and like you just have to follow them to a T, which is what they've been doing for the last year. So they have been inducted into the Eye, and then we get a stupid scene of Mark Ruffalo going to Paris dumb. And surprising the French lady, and he's like, the one thing I couldn't imagine happening was you. Shut up.
You. That's because she doesn't make any sense as a character. Like, she has no reason to be there. It does not add anything to the story at all, and I don't even think she's in the second one. So and like at the end, she's really like, just there for nothing.
Yeah, he's like, I know you should turn me in. Yeah, she should, because what you did's illegal.
Super illegal.
Even if they're gonna do the romance plot,
you love me too much.
Yeah, even if they're gonna do the romance plot, he shouldn't have gone to see her and been if he told her what was happening, he should have been 50 miles away when he did it. Because you know what she should have done? Turn him in.
But you know what they do instead? They go to that little bridge where you can lock secrets up, and they lock their secret up, and clicking the lock is also the start of their love. It's stupid. In case you wanted to know how I felt.
Anyway, we've been here for a very long time.
For so long. This is our longest episode ever.
If you want to hear us talk about Now You See Me Too, please let us know.
Unfortunately, we're going to.
We're going to. When I was watching it today, I was like, man, I'm going to watch the sequel after this. I usually don't watch the second one, even though the second one, I think, has the most famous scene out of the two, because I see it on Instagram all the time.
I always think that Evan Peters is in this movie, and this is when he has his Quicksilver moment. I don't know why, but you cannot convince me.
Funnily enough, he has his Quicksilver moment when he plays Quicksilver in the movie.
Yeah, for some reason my brain is not able to reconcile that Evan Peters is not in this movie as Quicksilver. I don't think I've ever seen him. I don't think I've ever seen the actual movie it's from, but I was waiting this whole movie. I was like, when is Evan Peters showing up? I was very confused.
You're like, it doesn't really make sense with the plot, but neither does the romance, so okay, whatever.
I was like, yeah. So moral of the story, you don't always need a romance plot. And also, if there is, it's me and whichever Franco it is. Yeah, this was really long. It didn't feel like that long, but I'm looking now and it's almost 2 hours.
Yeah, so it said an hour and 5 minutes on my recorder, and we hadn't even finished talking about the first show they did, which is like in the first 10 minutes of the movie. So
that's our bad. But we have fun. We hope you
probably
too.
Had fun.
I had a lot of fun.
I had a great time. We'll see you next week anyway. I'm Kalina.
We will see you next week. I've been Eleanor.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Don't quote me on that. One day we'll have an outro, but it's not today.